Welcome, everyone, through all time and space to an all new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, a podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look at anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will be covering the news from the first week of November 2020 and give our thoughts on whether the first three episodes of the 2010 Studio Madhouse anime Iron Man makes us sus or expect the rest of the series. My name is Jay Johnson. I'm a part-time weeb and full-time English language sensei, and with me, as always, is my co-host Sam Martinez, part-time weeb and full-time automail mechanic. How you doing today, Sam?
Jung Wingi Guru Johnson, Kumaha Hibarna.
Kudui. Okay. Oh, okay. Let's see. So we had Zulu last week or last
Mhm.
episode, and I should have recognized it. Like after listening back to the episode, I was like, I've heard this before. It's just like in the spur of the moment, I guess the language doesn't hit me in my membrane where it's supposed to hit me. But let's
Yeah, your
see,
brain just
Kudu.
wasn't primed, I guess.
Yeah, it's still not primed. It's never primed. Let's see. When I get out of teacher mode, my brain just goes der for the whole weekend until Monday. But let's see. Good a we. Uh, I want to say it sounds Asiatic again, but that's kind of broad. Uh, can you tell me one more time? Can you read it to me? Can you say it to me again
Oh,
one more
yeah.
time, actually?
Give me one moment. Yeah. Jung Wingi Guru Johnson, Kumaha Hibarna. And
Kumawi. Hmm.
I will give you a bit of a hint, too, because I gave you a hint last time. So
Yes.
this will be it's two hints, okay? So it's, as you said earlier, it's Asiatic, and with this one it's a lot closer to you, so think south. Which direction is this? Where's the compass? No, don't show me my location, Google. I want to see the compass.
All right.
It's the southeast of you.
Okay, southeast of me. Okay. Because I was going to say maybe it might be Maui because like I was listening to Moana's Maui audio track. So I was thinking it might
Hmm.
be that, but that's not southeast of me. So I would say something probably maybe something Chinese dialect, but something above Tibetan, but east of Kazakhstan. So I'm gonna say let's go with something Uzbeki.
You were closer when you said Moana, dude. I guess I.
Oh,
it's
um,
this is the Sudanese language, and it's native to Indonesia. Have you heard any languages from Indonesia at all, Jay?
Indonesian? No, I don't think I have. I mean, I've been to Singapore, and I
Hmm.
don't think that sounds like that. But maybe I'm just dumb in the ears. So, can you tell me something about this language that you chose?
Yes. So as I said, it's native to Indonesia, and the regions that Sudanese is normally used in. It's in the West Java, that sort of region, the Western Central Java region. It's in the region that's known as Jakarta. I don't know why Jakarta pops out to me, but I feel as though I have heard that region a whole lot before. And see, it's also in southern Limpang, and it's let's see, in 2016 it was shown to have 40 million speakers, and it's, let's see, the native speakers in Indonesia that speak Sudanese, they represent about 15% of Indonesians' total population. And you were actually close when you said Malay, because Sudanese appears to be the most closely related to Madurese and Malay, and they are more distinctly related to Javanese. And it also has several dialects depending on where in Indonesia the speakers speak Sudanese.
Okay, yeah. So I think I'm going to count this as a win because you gave me two different pieces of information. You said it was southeast of me,
It
and
is.
Jakarta is definitely not southeast of me.
It's
So
not?
I was going to go with Maui. So I was going to go with Maui. So I think I'm close enough. But how I'm doing, Sam? Doing
Okay.
pretty well. This week was more prep week for my school's English week next week. And again, this was the last week I could hold hold Among Us sessions for my students because they
Hmm.
got very much in trouble. Like their whole 12th grade class got in trouble, so I had to hold basically a disciplinary meeting every day after school until 6 p.m. and just had
Oh
it's really
no.
interesting. Yeah, very much a not authoritarian, but basically you get the whole class in the library. You have them stand in front of you, and almost all their subject teachers come sit down, like very much a America's Got Talent kind of way. They like sit behind the desk and they talk about
Yeah.
every individual student's performance and things they're having trouble with. So it's very interesting that I had my own translator with me. So to make sure that even though my students understand me, I had to make sure that my fellow teachers had to understand me. And I'd
Yeah.
rather not tempt my broken skills in their own language. So I
Hmm.
had my own translator, which was neat. But yeah, very interesting stuff whenever I have to participate in disciplinary meetings or have to talk with parents about how well their students are doing.
Did you
Because
tell them this
definitely,
is why we can't have nice things?
I tried, it didn't really translate that well. So I basically had to say that if you do good, then you get good things, essentially. Like, so you be good people, you get good stuff. But yeah, pretty busy week this week. I only have about 6 weeks of school left for this term, and then I get a whole month and a half off because of the government here is trying to make sure that the big C word doesn't come back in full force when the
Yeah.
like winter heres are really intense. So making sure that people are staying inside, away from people. So school's going to be out for about a month and a half. But how about you, Sam? How was your week?
My week it was tumultuous to say the least. I've spoken to you. I've had some personal issues happen with my family and also with the state of America because this week was election week, and that's been fun having to live through, seeing people make memes of regardless of who wins, there's going to be riots, and I will say some of the funniest things that's happened because even though this seems to be the longest time period in which the votes have been counted, which I think it's just because of our current uh, president, just because of his temperament. The joke. Have you've seen memes about how 2077 cyberpunk has been pushed back, right?
Yes, I'm constantly aware of its pushback.
Yeah. So there's a meme because one of our states, Nevada, is their count is it has been taking the longest to get, and it's just funny because people are posting memes now saying which are we going to get first, Half Life 3, Cyberpunk 2077, or Nevada's vote count. So things like that has been pretty funny in regards to things. I would say, in regards to work, there was an interesting case that we have seen. We've seen a person come in with a type of prosthesis that can only be worn, known as osseointegration. And I can't remember, Jay, have I mentioned it before on the podcast, osseointegration?
That big word? No, you have not mentioned that before.
Okay, so long story short, basically what the big word means is it's a surgery where they insert a pipe into your bone and it comes out the end of your skin, and you can essentially attach prosthetic components that way. So it's one step closer to prostheses like we would see in Full Metal Alchemist, Battle Angel, or any cyberpunk esque uh, media that we've seen. So it was just interesting because with this particular individual, she wasn't above the knee amputation, and so she had a knee and a prosthetic foot that's all attached to this pipe that's sticking out of her skin. Um, and later on, I could show you some pictures of her limb if you want, if if you're okay with being mildly grossed out.
I think I'm going to be okay, but yeah, that's interesting to hear. 'Cause I always like hearing about your job, Sam, because it
Hmm.
sounds like you go through a lot managing. Because you basically are in the position of a doctor, but you're also you're a healthcare provider, but also
Hmm.
you're taking these people through like a very difficult time in their life. So it's always interesting to see how you do like the technical side of your work, but then you do the interpersonal stuff, which is just as important. And even though you're not really trained as like a counselor or a therapist, that's kind of part of your job inherently.
Oh no, no, definitely. For instance, we've had an individual that we've seen a couple weeks ago where he lost his arm, and the way he lost his arm was through a car crash, and that happened about 5 weeks ago. So it's still kind of fresh, and we were talking to him, seeing what he if he was hypersensitive on his skin, and even then he needed to take the time to sort of walk through what happened. And even as he was doing that, it was sort of seeing somebody that you would see in a TV show who had shell shock or had PTSD. Just as he was talking about it, he was saying himself how he was sort of reliving it. And it sort of helps with the process, I guess, to sort of process what actually happened, that this is my new normal now. For instance, we've had patients who have to go get surgeries again because right after they have surgery, they would be in bed and they would need to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. And when you get up and you need to go take a leak or something, you're not, you're just waking up from dreaming. You're not thinking, oh, I need to be careful because I don't have my leg anymore. You're just thinking, I need to go to the bathroom before I make a mess. And then next thing you know, you're on the floor. So it's sort of one of those on the job training things coupled with some schooling, because we did have to have some classes where we had to learn how to properly talk with and treat some of these people, because not all of them come from the same background. Some of them come from money, some of them don't come from money, and there are in other cases where we may have to see prisoners, things of that nature. So it's definitely something to consider, that interpersonal relationship that you would have with the person that you are treating.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar in that same regard of getting training about uh, bullying and like managing stress and a lot of things that teenagers go through because most of my students are in that age bracket where they're going through like emotional growth, physical growth, and
Hmm.
they're in a situation now, especially with the big C word going on, that their future is very much uncertain. So the school has definitely been pushing for like more increased training for the teachers to be more understanding in that way.
Oh,
But
that's
that's enough
good.
with real life.
Yes,
That's enough with real life stuff. So, you want to get into some talking about some anime news highlights of the week to brighten up our mood?
it's good that you had mentioned the children, because my first news has to deal with children. Segway. So,
Also, kind of creepy.
I don't know. You'll understand. So
Okay.
it's just saying that the Promised Neverland, the second season, is going to be premiering on January 7th, 2021. And let's see, the second season, it was originally slated to premiere in October of this year. However, it was delayed because of the big C word, and they were just released the date being in January 2021 next year. And let's see, there's supposed to be an extra chapter that's going to be in this season as well. But Yeah, and real quick, the show will be streamed on Crunchyroll, Hulu, Funimation, and High Dive. And Toonami began to air it last April 2019. And there's also one thing that you had mentioned too, that there's supposed to be a live action film adaptation to the franchise. It's supposed to be opening up this December, and apparently Amazon is developing a separate English live action series adaptation of the manga as well. And I just wanted your thoughts a little bit on The Promised Neverland, Jay.
Yeah, so a big hype around this series because it was, of course, a manga adaptation, and the anime premiered back in 2018, I believe, because that was
Hmm.
back in competition with Demon Slayer at the time, because it was like
Yeah.
Emma, who the main character is, or at least one of the group of main characters. Oh, well, just to talk about the premise real quick, because it's one of those anime that definitely it hits differently if you get spoiled to it, and there's
Hmm.
a major twist kind of like in the same vein as Decadence that we talked about earlier this year,
Yeah, exactly.
where episode one is a big twist on the whole the premise, where the setup to the series is where there's this group orphanage where it's getting taken care of by these nuns, and the main characters are these three kids of the orphanage, and then bad stuff happens essentially. But the bad stuff in particular, you don't really want to name because that's part of the surprise. But it definitely has like the genre tag of horror if you're going into it, so be aware of that.
Hmm.
But again, it's a series that you want to experience without having anything spoiled to it. And like you said, like there's a lot of hype around season two for how season one ended, and I'm really excited to watch uh, Promised Neverland season two because I did get into the manga a little bit during this intermediate time or
Hmm.
intervening time, and it just looks fascinating again to cover something that's seeing kids in danger is like one of my favorite genres, even though I don't like horror that much. I do like when kids are put into peril because I put Made in Abyss pretty high up there.
Yeah.
Same thing with like death battle games like Future Diary or other series of that kinds. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to hop on that a little bit too. I read the manga before the anime came out. I hadn't been paying attention to the manga because it was all the stuff that I had read before. But definitely, if I would suggest Promise Neverland to those who like psychological games such as Death Note, it's a really, really good psychological thriller in my opinion, and how they also build the world and the characters as well. So, on to the second bit of news. Another uh, series from a Fuji TV anime lineup. Well, this was given in their presentation, I suppose. There is going to be a new anime titled, I think the way that you would pronounce it is Cestives. The way it's spelled is Cestvs, the Roman Fighter. And it's supposed to premiere in April 2021. And this series is an adaptation of the manga, which is Cestus, The Legend of Boxing in the Dark Ages, and as well as the sequel manga, this sequel manga that came from it, and they pretty much released art for it and the voice actors for it. For instance, the main voice actor is going to be somebody that was in Tokyo Ghoul RE second season. And the synopsis of this anime, it's more of a historical fiction, a little bit like Vinland Saga. It takes place in 54 AD. Cestus, a young boy who's orphaned by the Roman Empire, is made a slave, and he's placed in a school that's training to be a pugilist, which is a fancy word for boxer. And it's there that he begins his journey and trying to fight and take back his freedom. And from what I've seen, it seems like it's going to be another work that deals mainly with computer generated animation. And so I wanted sort of your thoughts on this, Jay. It seems like after Vinland Saga, we're getting another historical fiction anime. Do you think we'll be getting more of these to come if this guy ends up taking roots as big or make a big splash as Vinland did?
Yeah, it seems to be like a current trend that's trending upwards right now. Last week
Mhm.
we talked about Yasuki, which is the
Oh yes, yes,
anime
yes.
who the first black samurai that served under Ota Nobunaga.
Hmm.
So yeah, like you said, like Vinland Saga is a good example. I mean, we've been seeing like a lot of rise in like the relevance of Vikings again. Give it God of War 2 or God of War. I guess it's just called God of War. But
Yeah.
yeah, the new God of War remake or a sequel or prequel or reboots. And then like we just had Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as well as the show Vikings, which grew in popularity given how vicious it was compared to, not even compared to, but it was definitely a rival show to Game of Thrones. So I'm not
Hmm.
surprised that this is coming up now, or at least historical fiction fictionalizations are trending up words. So I'm looking forward to this because I'm a big fan of Megalobox, which is another that was the
Hmm.
cyberpunk edition or cyberpunk version of boxing, as well as
Yeah.
Hajime no Ippo, which is like a long time standing classic of like fights anime. So I'm very interested to see how brutal this is going to get because I can't imagine that kind of historic boxing is anything but bare knuckle boxing and not much technique to it. So I wonder how it's going to stay interesting if they're all going to be boxing the same way.
Oh no, no, definitely. And I would say just it would be interesting as well because mainly I've gotten me personally I've just become more into boxing, and at least modern day boxing people have different styles, even though it seems like you have like basically everyone's going in there trying to fight like Rocky, but you do have your more defensive players, you do have more of your aggressive players, and you have more of your balanced players, and I'm sorry, not players but athletes. And it would be interesting to see if see how technical they'll go with it, because as you mentioned Hajime no Ippo, they do a lot of shop talk, and it will be interesting to see if they try to go a more historical route to see or at least to highlight some of the more older boxing techniques. And I just hope that it does a better job than Kengan Ashura. Are you familiar with that work, Jay?
Yeah, that had some very rough CGI on it,
Hmm.
and but I think it was very interesting how they tried to mix the two art forms, be it like still hand drawn animations with the CGI. Again, I we talked about this in our Katana Gatari episode
Yeah.
where I really appreciate they did do shop talk in that anime, but it was kind of it was much of a mixed bag because it was just a tournament arc. It wasn't really much of a overarching story. So if you weren't really into the aesthetic of it, it was kind of just a lost cause on you since that was all the substance to it.
Hmm. Yep, essentially. But I think with the story of redemption, or not necessarily redemption, but this kid trying to win back his freedom, I think the story will have a will be a big component to it as well. So we'll just have to wait till April to see about this guy. Now on to the next bit of news again, because it seems like we've been talking about Mappa, Studio Mappa, the last few episodes. I think that it'd be best to bring up another Studio Mappa's news, but they are slated to have another anime come out next summer in 2021, and the anime work is called. Let me see if I can get this right. In the Japanese, it's called Cool Kyo Shinsa's Heion Sedai no Ida Tentachi. basically the translation would be the Itaden deities and the peaceful generation, and it's just a anime adaptation of this manga. And the synopsis for this one is that it's been about 800 years since the battle gods Itaden have both overwhelming speed and strength, and they had fought against demons who sought to rule the world. But the battle was done, and it's now a distant myth. And while the peaceful generation of the gods, basically they're new gods who were born, who never experienced war, they are now thrown into war because somebody had went and revived the demon clans, and apparently there's three forces of power that are going to be battling for control. And it seemed to be a wacky comedic battle type anime. So, well, again, Jay, what do you think of Mappa doing all these animes back to back?
It sounds about right given their popularity recently. I mean, they
Hmm.
did do listeners earlier this year,
Yeah,
and they also did God of High School. They're doing right now the Juju Kaisen, so I'm not surprised that they're again another trending upward studio, especially when they we just reported like 2 weeks ago that they're in a business with Netflix now, and they're
yeah.
putting through like, original series through Netflix and their giant, massive production line. So, not surprised that Mappa's kind of taking the lead and like putting their best ideas forward because anime studios do come and go pretty frequently, or at least they kind of find a niche to work in. But Mappa's kind of just putting their name out on good fight choreography. So I'm not surprised that this is a property they might want to delve into to kind of diversify their works or their publications. So I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to this off that little description that you gave, even though we don't know any of the voice actors or like any of the visual stylings yet. But yeah, interesting.
Well, yeah, all right now we just have stills and a sort of TV promo. As you said, we don't, at least from what I've seen right here, we don't really have any information on who's directing or who's going to be voice acting in it. And the last bit of news that I have, hopefully, I'm just interested to see what your opinion is on it. Hopefully, you don't think I'm trying to poke fun at you or anything. But it's talking about a new anime that's supposed to be released that is volleyball themed as well. It's called 2.43 Seiin Koko Danchi Volleyball, which is 2.43 Seiin High School Boys Volleyball Club. And they just released a key visual regarding their numbers, and they have the players there as well, so you can see them all. And it is slated to begin on January 8th in 2021. And you being a big haiku fan, I didn't know if you had dabbled in other volleyball animes. Well, manga. With this one, this was a light novel series, so
Oh yeah, so I saw this originally like 2 weeks ago when its first trailer dropped, and
mhm,
again, like it was in the vein of animes of the same kind kind of flock together. So like all the high Q fans that are like still in their emo sad mode that the manga ended like a couple months ago, or like,
mhm,
oh my, maybe this is going to save the volleyball anime scene and kind of like replace Haikyuu essentially, even though the anime is still going on right now. Still, they still kind of looking for the new thing, but I'm not really in that kind of camp of I need a replacement because I've watched Haikyuu about 3 times straight through in the past couple of months. So it doesn't really get old for me. So I'm not really looking for a new fix, nor am I really thinking about the way of like, oh, if I enjoy this one volleyball anime, I'm going to enjoy this other volleyball anime. That's not really the strength of Haikyuu, just the presentation of or the depiction of the sport itself It's the characters, it's the world. So it has to do some heavy lifting to get my attention. And I haven't seen anything from this yet. And again, light novels uh, aren't really a good indicator of quality because like light novels very very much in a wide range. I mean, if you look at SAO, it's kind of that kind of camp of
Yeah.
you never know what you're going to get when it comes to a light novel. But this I'm going to. It's not going to make my list for next season to watch out for. But if it's somewhere that someone mentions that it's interesting enough, I might check it out.
Well, just so you know and prepare yourself, there is a voice actor from Haiku that's going to be voice acting one of the main characters here in this show as well. And they also have the director for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5 Golden Wind. He's going to be directing it. And let's see. The series composition is going to be created by the person who did My Hero Academia. So just wanted you to know that way you don't feel like you've been betrayed by one of your beloved voice actors from Haiku.
Oh yeah, no problem. I mean, everyone can have some, trash series under the belt. No one has a perfect record. So if this does turn out to be good and not just hot guys doing volleyball, then it'll be interesting to see. But I look forward to that. But is that the last news story, Sam?
Yes, this is the last news story.
All right, awesome. I forgot to mention like the codes will always be in the description. So we have three segments today. So thank you, Sam, for the news. And
You
now
are
going
welcome.
into our second segment of the episode is going to talk about our 3 episode test for the fall 2020 season. So about 3 episodes ago, we talked about the anime that we're watching for the season. And let me tell you, Sam, oh my gosh, are there so many new animes this season? And 2020 is wrapping up so strongly, it almost makes up for all the death and disease and
Is it? Is it really? Okay.
a little bit, a little bit. So, yeah, so I wanted to talk about your my number 5, which I think you had higher up on your list, the Akudama Drive.
Akudama Drive.
Yeah, this is my favorite anime of the season so far. Where was it on the list for you? It was my number 5.
It was my number 2.
All right, cool, cool. Yeah. So, can you refresh us? Can you refresh me about the story?
Yes, so Akudama Drive essentially it started out with this girl. She was coming back home from work. She tried to return this coin to this guy from this stand. Some comedy of errors, shenanigans happens, and she is arrested for trying to dine and dash. And as she is in the police station, she is roped up in a conspiracy with all these other people known as Akudama. And essentially, Akudama just translates to bad guy. And in this world, if you have the moniker of an Akudama, that just means that you're wanted. If you have a certain bounty, quote unquote, the way that their bounties work in this world compared to One Piece is if you're caught, you would have so many years in prison. There's one guy, I think it was 5,000 years or something along those lines. Just showing much night how notorious this person is. And she, like as I said, she's roped up into this conspiracy with all these other Akudama, in which they have to free this other Akudama so that they can continue to do certain tasks for this character who is tied to money, and he just needs these the abilities of these individuals for these Akudama. And it's a very wide variety of people. You have your brawler who can essentially plow through a wave of 20 robots and not break a sweat. You have this super hacker guy who essentially has little robots that he uses for jetpack. You have this other person's known as a carrier who has this super charged up motorcycle that he uses for everything. You have this sort of doctor lady who can apparently heal any wound, even herself, if she's cut in half or something along those lines. And it's just a very uh, rambunctious, fun time, in my opinion. But Jay, what is it about Akudama Drive that keeps you coming back?
Yeah, so as of this recording, there are 5 episodes available right now, and a lot of
Hmm.
these series that we talked about before on are available on Funimation Now, which is the Funimation streaming site. And we'll talk about something later, but that's Crunchyroll. So very easy to find all these. That's the benefit of the current anime scene is that
Hmm.
it's pretty easy to find anything that you're looking for, unlike the anime that we'll talk about later on today. But anyways, yeah. So yeah, Akudama Drive. What really caught me about this series, and again, it was just in my fifth place, but higher for yours, and I only put it on my list because you mentioned it earlier. And the thing that keeps me coming back, Sam, is that it's like just a good time. Like all the
Hmm.
criminals get like cool code names, so much of like a Reservoir Dogs kind of situation. Like so
Yes.
they don't even have names. So like the carrier is just called carrier, the doctor is just called doctor, the hacker is hacker, and
Hmm.
then like the normal girl who is that we're getting the perspective from, or is the layman, so we can get all the expedition dumped to us, is like just called ordinary girl. So it's like fun, kind of gimmicky in that way, but then all the characters are so bombastic, like you said. If I was going to parallel it to something, I would say it's kind of like Reservoir Dogs or Ocean's 11, but they're
Oh
all
yes.
villains in their own right. They're not really good guys because the
Hmm.
criminal that they're seeking to free, we see in the first episode, his name is Cutthroat,
Hmm.
and he has a life sentence of 900 years. So like all these Akudama definitely have, like you said, like they have like these bounties on their head. They have like basically war level crimes, and like the setup of the
Essentially.
show is that yeah, they have essentially a sub to the show is that the Japan basically went through a civil war period and basically divided in half. So one region of Japan is subservient to the other, and then there's like military police in charge of the whole, and criminals are kind of freedom fighters, but they're still bad people because they're all psychotic in a different way, and it's very much enjoyable to see crazy people do crazy things, but
Hmm.
also how crazy people interact with other crazy people. And then on top of that, you have this cyberpunk aesthetic. So we talked
Yes.
about 20 Cyberpunk 2077,
Hmm.
but I would say it's more of a uh, Blade Runner. Also, whatever. What else am I thinking about? I guess Blade Runner is a good parallel to this. So it's so visually stimulating that you just want to pause every second of
Yes.
this anime and just take a screenshot of it. So that's why I keep coming back to it.
I would also say too, just hopping on the Blade Runner parallel, even though it has like that Blade Runner aesthetic, it doesn't feel dark and depressing. I guess it's because of the energy of the characters and the comedy of error type situations that they get themselves in. Because as you said, like it feels like a fun time, even though we have this cool dark aesthetic and it's offset by these neon lights and these bright colors as well. And I guess that's what makes it so much fun. Like even though like it's in a dark setting and like you said, it's in this post Civil War time frame, it's still very, very fun. And I had another point. I can't remember at the moment. Um, but no, like I'm glad that you are enjoying Akudama Drive as much as I am right now. So it's still at my number two spot for what's going on. I'd say that it definitely has passed for me, and I'm glad that it's passed for your 3 episode test as well, Jay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it has probably a good contention for best
Hmm.
anime, not best anime of the year, but top 10 anime of the year. It's like looking at now we're in the fall season, so it's the last season of 2020, and the anime this year have been just like kind of on point. I mean,
Hmm.
there's been a drop during the summer because a lot of it was delayed for later or for next year, but yeah, it's like this is definitely up there for me. So that was my number five, and your number two. So
Real
what
quick
was?
before we go, I just remembered going back to when you mentioned Reservoir Dogs. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but every episode is titled after an American movie. Like the beginning, it was titled Reservoir Dogs, and I think the second one, when they had to go on the train, it was called Speed. I don't know. I think that's also another thing too. It's similar to what you said with Penny and Stocking earlier. I think like they try to take in some of that Western influence, and they show that in the names of the episodes. So that was my brief aside that I wanted to get back to because I finally remembered what I wanted to say.
No problem. I mean, they're all, yeah. So, yeah, just talk a little bit more about that. I mean, I found that interesting enough because all
Hmm.
the titles are after heist movies, and the whole anime is around a heist.
Yeah.
So that's why I made the Ocean 11 parallel. And yeah, Speed is it's not really a heist. Well, there is a heist in Speed, and then same thing with Reservoir Dogs is a heist. So, like, all the titles are basically heist movies. So,
Hmm.
I'm looking forward to see how that, if there is a deeper connection than just that surface appeal. But yeah. So about your number five, Sam, what was that?
Uh, Noblesse. It was essentially it was just pretty boys trying to be dark and gruesome characters in an interesting world. I mean, hell, like one of the reasons why I was interested was it seemed as though the fights and the powers were going to be interesting, and the only time that it seems as though like as the fight is starting to get you interested, it stops. It's just a horrible tease in regards to all of that, and the way that they focus on the characters, it's it would be funny and interesting if you already knew the characters, but because I don't know anything and they haven't really given any exposition for anybody except for maybe the noblest themselves and the human experiments, but like on the noblest and who the people who identify as noblest, their introduction was very lacking and wanting, and all the confrontations, it's just a bad tease. So it makes you think that there's going to be more, but there's not more that's actually going to be coming. So that it's one of the few reasons why I'm frustrated with it and why it's failed for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it failed for me after episode one because, I mean, a lot of the things that we can say about these webtoon adaptations recently, of course, webtoon being the Korean manhwa or
Hmm.
manga site that earlier this year we had Tower of God. Again, Tower of God had mixed reception, but as a standalone first season, it was decent. It passed. I mean, it
Hmm.
got everyone interested in going to webtoons to continue the manhwa. And then we had Tower of God, which was a big tournament arc, but
Hmm.
again, filled up a lot of the exposition dumps with unjustified setup. And then that's all that Noblest was. It feels very much of a support or a supplementary media to the manhwa. So
Essentially, yeah.
if you don't read the manhwa, then you're just totally lost because they basically drop you into the story without really any setup, and that's very confusing. And anything that you can say about it is basically explained away as like you should have known better when you came into an adaptation, but that's not the job. That's not the job of an adaptation. It's supposed to introduce you to things, not just tell you something you should already know. So it's for the people that are already familiar with the property. So if you're going to say anything about Nobilis, it's about vampires, kind of. It's about humans trying to find these vampires, kind of, and then like what does the vampires do in this world, and it's a lot of a
They go to high
mess.
school
And
apparently.
they go to high school apparently, yes, like every Japanese vampire goes to high school. But anyways, yeah, so it's a fail right off the bat and can't
Yeah.
recommend it at all. But again, I think it's one of those things of if you read the manhwa, then you're going to enjoy it because you already know it, but the
Hmm.
anime doesn't have time to explain itself to you. All right, so let's say my number four is the Ikebukuro Westgate Park. Did you get a chance to check this out, Sam, after my recommending it
I
last
did,
time?
I did, I did. I saw the first episode. I'm trying to remember if I saw episode two or not. It I guess I just need to give it another shot because, or at least finished the three episodes, because I did watch it and it didn't really entrance me. It felt a little bit predictable in what they did with the little girl and things. But again, maybe I just judged it too quickly. But what about you, Jay? How has it? Because right now they have four episodes, or are they five as well?
Yeah, so right now the fourth episode is
Mm-hmm.
out, but we're doing this on like the premiere of the next
Yeah.
anime season or the X anime term. So episode five will be released today, essentially. So yeah, I'm giving it a pass for me because
Okay.
of where it's going. Like again, like three-episode test is to set up the story, to introduce us to the characters, and even though there might be something contrite, like in the first episode, there's like a missing girl or mysterious
Mm-hmm.
girl kind of setup to it that it's kind of cliche in that. But again, like what you go into this story for are the characters because it is a adaptation of this novel series that's based around an urban mystery. So
Yeah.
like if you're not even if the story right now is a kind of bland setup, it's introducing the characters to how they behave, how they interact, their interest and their stakes in the story overall. So when the turn happens later, again, if you're going to keep watching it, I don't want to ruin it for you. But
Yeah.
again, the three-episode test does come true for this one because you do get in that third episode the inciting incident. And I would say that
Oh. Okay.
the first episode is just like set up to that
It,
world that's going to unravel.
Okay. I will say that one thing that I did kind of like and was kind of interested by was the main character, how he was sort of this bridge for the underground gangs as well as the police officers, mainly because of the people that he knew growing up, and they all hold him in high regard. And he's sort of, uh, I'm trying to remember. He's a little bit like Isaiah, but everybody likes him. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Mikado, again, the main character of the series, is basically a
mhm,
broker or
yeah,
mediator for the gangs in Ikebukuro, which is a big city district in Tokyo. And like yeah, like you said, like he basically has friends in every single gang, and he basically knows all the leaders. There's like this gang called the Hammer Bros, which I thought was
mhm,
hilarious because they go around smashing things or threatening people with hammers, like sledgehammers, and his job is
yeah,
basically mediating between these groups who have like different ideologies and goals in the city, and they're all like criminal organizations. They're like right criminals hurting people, but he's kind of a keep my hands clean kind of guy, even though he's friends with all these dangerous people. And it's
yeah,
basically a not paint by numbers story, but it's one of those things of like you can predict where it's going,
mhm,
and I get that with the first episode, and I think it's a definitely keep keep it going until the third episode. And if the third episode and that when that mystery actually drops, and if it doesn't really sell you, then you can just drop it. But for me, it's a
okay,
pass.
all right. I'll go ahead and I'll do that then. I'll give it those other two episodes then.
All right, cool. So what's your number four, Sam?
My number four, it was Girls in the Dungeon.
Ah, yes, of course,
Yes.
season three. Of, is it wrong to pick up girls in the dungeon? So
Mm-hmm.
did it did it did it do it for you?
I would say it's been interesting. I again, because with what's going on and the way that they set up the world, and it seems as though that it's going to change the rest of the story, and definitely in how the world operates, which is good. I'm just a little suspect, mainly because with these type of works, whenever they do that, again, as I said before, it seems like each season is sort of like an anthology almost. But like, so for instance, like something that happened in season one, it does impact season two, but it's not the main focus. But It's just that it seems as though with what's going on right now, because they're playing around with the dynamic of the monsters and the adventurers, which is the main currency of that world. An adventurer goes and kills a monster, and they get jewels that they go and they trade in for currency. And as I said, they're sort of shaking up that relationship, and that would definitely have an impact on that world and on that society. And just with the way that they've dealt with the main characters and the supporting female characters before, it would make me a little sus, but not really. I guess more apprehensive because they've done better. They've done good with the main character and how he approaches his female characters in the past. But again, because I'm still gun shy from all the other animes that I've seen that have done this, it's made me a little bit anxious as to what's going to happen. I would still say like it's past. I'm just more or less interested to see which route they're going to go. That's mainly what's keeping me going.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, again, a 3 episode is
Hmm.
supposed to just intrigue you enough to keep going, and again,
Yeah.
that's his job. But I mean, is this the third season, right?
No, it's yeah. You're right. You're right. It's third season. It's a third season.
All right, yeah. So, like, if you're in this far, then you're more likely not settled into it. And like, is it
Pretty
wrong to
much.
pick up girls in the dungeon? Is kind of a bad title,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really lean into what you would think of like that kind of title would entail because it is a dungeon crawler, not isekai because it's just a fantasy world, but
Hmm.
Bell is the main character, white haired kid. His image is kind of not iconic, but it's familiar enough with the anime community that you can recognize Bell from his character design. And
Yeah.
then the family dynamic of the series is that these are all based on like Greek gods, and they have familia, and those are kind of acting as the clan or guild kind of setup of the world. And like you said, monsters are the currency, so defeating monsters gets you these crystals, and the crystals have value, and that's how the economy of the series works. So again, like the premise is very interesting, and
Yeah.
the dynamic between the characters is good. So I never really caught on to the series just because it kind of came out during a time where it felt like a SAO clone, sort of
Yeah.
line clone, which is not a fair comparison. But that is what formed in my mind when they came out around the same period. But yeah, I think if I do get around to it when the series does wrap up, which it does seem like this might be the final season for it, I might come back to it.
Yeah. No, that'll be good. And what was your number four, Jay?
My four was the Ikebukuro Westgate Park.
Yes.
So we're
Yes.
on
Yes.
to your number three, actually.
So I would put girls in the dungeon in number four, and Fire Force just floundering at number four. I would say it's gotten interesting. They've dealt with something in the story right now that they realize the secret that has to deal with the church, and the last episode that I just saw has to deal with the priest. Sorry, not the priest, but the nun character that's with the main characters. Her coming to grips with that truth and the church that she basically works for, and that was interesting. Seeing her faith get tested and seeing her having to overcome her own insecurities. So it's just little stuff like that that's just feeding me enough to keep watching. And as you said, with this show, it's a little bit like my situation with Pickup Girls in the Dungeon. I've been watching it for so long, so these little snippets is like, okay, I'm interested to see what the next episode's going to do now.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit more hype over it because I'm watching it literally as soon as it premieres because I'm on
Yeah.
the same side of the planet as that. So it's like the one anime that as soon as it drops, I'm watching because
Hmm.
again, I'm more in the allowing the mystery to unfold kind of type because
Yeah.
the series does distract itself a lot into little antics of the firefighting force core, And the world's interesting enough where basically the world almost turned into a star essentially. So like the whole it's called the cataclysm in this show,
Yeah.
where basically the whole surface of the earth caught on fire. And again, that premise alone is interesting enough, but then you look into this current season where they kind of explore outside the boundaries of Japan and show what the rest of the world's like. And
Yeah.
the Japan Tokyo Empire is really the only civilization that's left. And then when you form that around a religion, and it just works in a lot of ideologies about what is the point of religion as well as the point of
Mhm.
government in that kind of post-apocalyptic world, because that's what Fire Force is essentially. It's past the apocalypse, but the civilization has been existing long enough that they've kind of uh, reformed, and there's like third generations of firebenders. So again, like it's a lot of positives, but again, it does go into a lot of critical story elements that do make it weak. So again,
Mhm.
I'm in the same camp of you, that I'm following along just because I've been following along for so long.
I've put
So
in so much work. There has to be a good payoff.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, Soul Eater is by the same author that did Soul Eater, so I
Mhm.
like how Soul Eater ended. So I'm gonna assume that the payoff to all this Fire Force is going to be equally as satisfying. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
I got that
definitely.
too. Yeah, so all right, my number three was Moriarty the Patriot. And there are basically 5 episodes, going into this
Mhm.
next week is 6 episodes. But yeah, following along with this series because of I'm a big fan of Project or Production IG, who's done like Attack on Titan and Haikyuu, and basically it's the whole Sherlock story, but through the lens of Moriarty. And I like everything about the series, and it does pass my 3 episode test because a lot of the background design is good, the character design is good, everything around the series is just like so well rounded and crafted that it's one of
Mhm.
those things of, oh, I'm appreciating the effort of highlighting a villain and all the intermachinations that go on with that kind of thinking of how to conquer the world. Very much of the same Lelouch variety of Code Geass of like, it is a villain, but you're kind of rooting for the villain, which
Yeah.
is kind of a weird thing to do. But everything about it is interesting enough. It feels like very much the anime version of Peaky Blinders, if you know that show, Sam.
I remember Peaky Blinders. Yeah.
So like the Moriarty family is gets a highlight. You see that Moriarty has like 2 brothers as well as like a cover job along with his business as a professional crime consultant. And
Mhm.
then Sherlock Holmes gets introduced in like within the later half of the 3 episodes. So like you even get a idea set up to their eventual confrontation. So everything that's paying off in these first 3 episodes feels like honed, and it's going to feel like it's going to pay off in the way that you expect it. So I'm going to keep it as a pass and keep it going.
Oh no, no, that's good. And I watched the first 2 episodes, as you had suggested, and I did like the monkey's paw take on the criminal consultant that he being Moriarty has done, where this one guy, his son was taken, and he was given the opportunity to enact revenge, and it seemed as though Moriarty was doing the mob sort of type of currency, whereas I do this. I forgot what the word is. I'll do this thing for you, but later on, when I need you to do something for me, I'm going to come and collect it. Sort of like putting that person in his back pocket, sort of making his network. And it was also interesting on how because I didn't watch the third episode. I saw the end of the second episode, and it had inferred how he came into the position that he did with him and his younger brother, and so that was interesting. I guess the one thing that was sort of off-putting to me was how sanctimonious that Moriarty was in regards with what he did. that sort of didn't vibe with me. But I think if I go ahead and give it that third episode, I'll probably be sucked into it like you are.
Oh no, I totally agree. It does. There is a lot of depth to his character that I think they're not really fleshing out fully, so they're leaving you
Hmm.
wanting in that way. So again, it's like one of the things that the second episode does have a part two resolution in episode three. So there is
Okay.
something to that what you just said. But yeah, for our top two spots, Sam, one of them is Juju Kaisen, and what was the
Hmm.
other one for you?
No, that was it because my number two was Akudama and my number one is
Oh,
Jujutsu and your number
yeah.
two was Jujutsu, right? So
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
why don't you go ahead and you give us your take on Jujutsu so far?
Yeah, so it definitely does pass my three episode test, even though we talked about this 3 weeks ago when it was on the third episode. And right now there are six episodes available. And it completely passes. And again, I think it's one of a contender for top anime of the year
Yeah.
because it's again another studio mapper production and how they're handling the martial arts and the character developments is just so on point and engaging and compelling that you enjoy watching them going about demon hunting.
Hmm.
And again, like the premise is solid. In the first episode, the main character's grandfather dies, and the grandfather has this really great Uncle Ben, not really Uncle Ben moment, but he gives that passing wisdom, and you get a good
Yeah.
strong sense of who the main character is and where all his anachronisms or mannerisms come from. He's a goofy character who wants to save people,
Hmm.
and essentially he's going into this demon hunting business because he wants to save as many people as possible. And he's working with other demon slayers who have different reasons to hunt demons. Like the uh, girl he ends up working with only hunts demons because she wants to live in New York. Sorry, not New York, but Tokyo.
Yes.
Tokyo. And it's really interesting to see how that dynamic between the demon hunters are going to unravel. And right now on episode six, well, I don't want to ruin with episode six, but again, like this three episode setup does work well because there is a cliffhanger part two with three and four that just wants
Hmm.
you to keep watching and it's just engaging. And I think this is going to be one of those series that is a good binge watch later on.
Oh, it definitely is. And as you said, with the dynamic of the characters, it's very much like what I mentioned in the first episode of God of High School. I would God of High School was a mess, but the first episode was good and it was golden the way that it was done. And the way that they introduced the characters and how they had this natural friendship that wasn't forced. In Jujutsu Kaisen, the main characters, you can tell like they had to work a little bit. There was some friction, but even though there's friction between the characters, there is definitely this sense of unity that's there. For instance, the female character that wants to live in Tokyo because she's a country bumpkin. The main character, he's from the country too, so they have these moments where they're like, "Oh, we're in the big city. Let's go do big city stuff because we're both from the country." And they have like those moments like that, and yet there that moment is flipped because the dude says something that's stupid and gets her angry, but that's sort of like their friendly dynamic. And I can't remember his name, but the black haired guy who can summon the shadow creatures. He's sort of like off putting and he would do like these one liner snide comments against the character, against his other classmates. But you can tell that there were moments where he has shown that his character, he actually appreciates them and he doesn't wish them any ill. He does his best to protect them, and it's just the way that they build up those characters and that dynamic. It's just very very good, along with everything else in that show. So it definitely did pass my test as well.
All right, cool. So my last
Hmm.
spot goes to a continuation, kind of like your Fire Force, is that this
Hmm.
is in my top spot, and I'm watching again on a as soon as it release basis is Haikyuu to the Top season two. So it does
Yes.
technically count as a independent season, but technically this is just season 4 of the series. And right now it is episode 19 that just released recently.
Oh.
And again, it's more of the not more of the same because the animation style changed recently to a lot of mixed reception, but it does seems like it has heightened or it's maybe sharpened because like a few episodes ago it wasn't as good. So I don't should probably look into why the animation's kind of taken a step up. Maybe people were complaining too hard, or which doesn't really make sense for kind of their broadcasting schedule of Haikyuu,
Yeah.
given popularity. So I actually don't know what's going on with that. But they are in their national tournament arc right now. They're going
Hmm.
to soon face off against their like giant rivals, the main team being Karasuno,
Yeah.
and they're going up probably in the near future against Nekuma, which is their like kind of their big bad school because they've kind of been working their way through the past couple seasons through all their other big bads. But
Hmm.
again, like the manga did end recently, and we have maybe a season or two left if they do another full 24 episode push. But have to be wait and see. But what they're doing now is really engaging. Like all their side characters are getting like a spotlight. They're putting more emphasis on like the C level tier characters and like giving them a moment to shine. So if you
Oh,
have a
really?
favorite, yeah, like, if you have a favorite, they're kind of getting their moment to shine just very briefly. And it's really nice to see that they're expanding the story out in this way. I don't know if the manga does it. I'm going to let the anime educate me about the series before I go back to read the manga when it
Yeah.
completes and read it on hardback or omnibus form. But yeah, that's why it's passing right now, and I'm going to keep watching it, and hopefully that I'll be happy with it, and Bill will be watching it as the world's on fire. But anyway, Sam, that's the fall 2020 anime review and all the passes and fails, see what
Yep.
keeps us going, and we'll come back probably for our top 10 list of the 2020 animes that we've talked about throughout the couple past episodes. But on to some anime review in particular from 2010. Sam, are you a Marvel or DC fan?
Oh, hopefully by now you would know that I am most definitely a Marvel fan, sir. I do appreciate a good DC story every now and then, but Marvel is my home.
All right, cool. So, were you aware that Madhouse did an anime of Iron Man before our podcast?
Yes, they. I don't know if I knew that I didn't know if Madhouse did Iron Man, but I know that there was an Iron Man and an X Men anime that came out at the same time. I would like to think that Madhouse did that one too, mainly because the aesthetic and the styles were very, very similar. But yes, I was aware that it did came out.
You're in the minority then, because for one, yes, you're right. This is actually part of a 4-part project between Marvel Entertainment and
Hmm.
Madhouse Studios. So they also had, so Iron Man was the first, then followed up by Wolverine, then
Yeah.
the X-Men, and then Blade. So they
Yes, that's
happen all
right. They
in,
did do Blade. I forgot about Blade.
they happened in 2010 for Iron Man, so we just passed the 10-year anniversary. It premiered back in October 1st, 2020, sorry, 2010. And then in 2011, they dropped the Wolverine, X-Men, and Blade series. So this is called, they're collectively called Marvel Anime. So it's
Hmm.
not even Madhouse presents these series. But yeah, so these four basically center around Marvel characters. I hope everyone knows that it's more parlance now, given we're post-apocalyptic of the snap that happened 2 years ago, which is surprisingly, well, 2 years ago, yeah, a year ago, well, more than a year ago now. But anyways, oh no, I was just thinking about, yeah, because I the reason why I think this went under the radar because this happened in the same year as Iron Man 2, and
Yeah.
Iron Man 2 is still one of the least beloved Marvel films, so it kind of went under the radar. So if it definitely premiered when the first Iron Man premiered, then I think this would have been more beloved. But right now,
Yeah.
I think everyone's forgotten about it because, for one, it centers on Tony Stark going to Japan to establish a new arc reactor, as
Hmm.
well as test out his latest and greatest armor, which is kind of like a staple for any Iron Man storyline called the Dio. So for all
Is
those,
that a JoJo reference?
is that a JoJo reference? Yes, everything is a JoJo reference.
Exactly.
Us referencing JoJo is a JoJo reference. But anyways, yeah, and this is happening on the eve of his retirement, so it's like a final Iron Man storyline, and it was
Mhm.
written. Also, this is the thing that it's a story presented by Warren Ellis. Are you familiar with this comic book writer?
No. Well, what has Warren done?
Warren Ellis is, I guess, on one of my top lists of favorite comic book writers, but
Yeah.
I know him most readily from Red, R-E-D. There
Oh,
was a
the Morgan Freeman, Bruce Willis, and I forgot what her name was, but it was about
help me
the
here.
retired people who came back.
Yeah. Red stands for Retired Extremely Dangerous. So,
Okay.
yeah, I know him from that, but he also has some more influential works. But yeah, it's a story by him, but again, the story writer. So, like, he presented the story, but the story writer actually is a writer of the Common Writer series.
That's
And
why it feels like it does. Oh.
exactly.
Wait,
And
wait,
that's
wait, wait.
why
Before we go on, which Common Rider series? Which one?
the most recent series. I forgot to bring up the writer's credentials, but
Okay.
all of
No,
his, like, of his 27 works, almost more than half of them are common writer from like the last decade, I guess.
okay. Because I will say, like, I'm a Common Rider fan, and there are. It, I think we might have mentioned this before, but the Common Rider series. For those of you who for are you familiar with Common Rider or no, Jay?
I'm just familiar with it. It's in the genre of Sentai, which is
Hmm.
the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger genre.
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with it enough to actually know what Common Rider looks like.
So you've probably seen images of him because of how popular he was. The green bug man with a red scarf. He would have red eyes and a green helmet, white gloves. You ever seen
Oh
anything
yeah.
similar to that?
No,
Okay.
I've seen it. It's just like I've seen it,
Yeah.
but I don't know if that's like if there's specific installments of Common Rider, or is that just the Common Rider always looks like that? Because I always
Okay.
remember Common Rider as looking like a Beetleborg.
Yes. So that was the one that looks like a Beetleborg. That was the very first Common Rider, and think about Kamen Rider as whereas Super Sentai Power Rangers are for kids from 7 and under, Kamen Rider is for that teenage age. For instance, when people get hurt, there's actually blood and there's death, and so they deal with a lot more heavier stuff. And sometimes the stories deal with heavier themes. And the whole point of Common Rider, at least in the beginning, was he was a human experiment, and sort of like the $1 Million Man, and it's like a mishmash of the story for Cyborg 009. Whereas there was this evil company who made him, and he essentially broke out of their control and became a force to help fight against the company that made him. And the thing that made him popular was that he would ride on a motorcycle, which is why he was called Common Rider, because common means masked, so he was the masked rider. And all the series, it's more of an anthology or a multiverse, so it's like each new Common Rider series that comes out afterwards is like a alternate universe where it's a different Common Rider for different reasons. And it the main focus is the main dude has to have a power where he can change into a Super Sentai suit, and he has to have a motorcycle so that he can be the common writer. That's like one of the main themes that go on in there. And all that is to say that from the Common Rider series that I've seen, there has been really good storytelling elements that have been in this shows. And the reason why I was asking was because I wanted to know which ones that he had his hand in. Because if he was on some of the good, better ones, then I would have held him. Then he should have done better work. But I have seen other Common Rider shows where the stories sort of fall flat, and I wanted to either have more reason to berate this writer or have a reason to explain why we had the show that we had. Now I'll step off my
Okay, so
soapbox.
oh no, it's fine because I think we're in the same camp as this show is so boring that I got so excited to finish it. Like, it's really hard to explain that. It's more like I want to watch all of this so I can be done with it forever. So
I,
again, like,
yeah.
3 episode tests again. Like, so the first episode is called Iron Man and arrives in Japan. So
Mhm.
it's a very interesting setup to like a Iron Man story. Actually, that's even the problem off the bat is that it's not very much an Iron Man story,
No,
and
it's not.
it literally could have been anything else. And I think that's the whole problem with the series just from the first 3 episodes is that this this has nothing to do with Tony Stark. It's literally a mecha action um, evil monster of the week problem solving fighting show. And like again, like I kind of get the relation to the Common Rider series is that there's a
Hmm.
monster of the week or a problem of the week or
Yeah.
some obstacle that Tony Stark needs to confront, but again, it's not anything that needs to be Iron Man about it. And we talked about High School of the Dead, how it's like basically a commentary of Western media and like the zombie genre. We also talked about the world God only knows that talks about gamers and like the
Hmm.
kind of culture around gaming and how toxic some of like certain gameplays can be. But this, like, there's nothing essential to the story that demands Tony Stark be in it. And Tony Stark is such a good character. Again, like stories like Demon in the Bottle or
Hmm.
Extremist, which Warren Ellis did write. That's why I brought up his name earlier because you obviously see that disparity
Oh.
between a presenter or a writer that presents a pitch to the series and then the series writer that basically takes it in from a new direction because Warren Ellis also counseled on Iron Man 3 when oh, who is that director? The director of Iron Man 3. Oh, Shane Black. Shane
Hmm.
Black did Iron Man 3. So they explored the extremist kind of arc in that movie. So,
Yeah.
like, again, like, that would have been a Tony Stark story, but this very much falls flat.
I, for me, it felt like I was reliving Dragon Ball Evolution or M. Night Shyamalan's Avatar. It was all flash and no substance, and it it presented something that was interesting, having Tony's character being viewed and critiqued by the Japanese populace, and it was like that's an interesting concept because of how Tony is comes off as super braggadocious, just with his personality is just very strong, is very straightforward, and apparently the Japanese society, even company men, their values or how they present themselves, it's just totally different. That if they had focused more on that in terms of the scenes with the reporter, that would have been more interesting. But in the show, it was more of a caricature of Tony. It was like everybody else was telling their representation of Tony of what he should have been, but he wasn't doing anything like that. They were saying, "Oh, you should be more humble. You should be more humble," and he was doing nothing but be humble. For instance, he got to meet with the uh, Ministry of Defense, I think is that the main dude that's behind the Ministry of Defense, and he was just very humble about it. Not very Tony. He was just saying, "Oh, I'm thankful. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to meet me," and was just being very accommodating. For instance, he told Tony to get into the helicopter so that they can ride around town and talk privately. Tony's not about that. He was like, "Yo, no, you come see me. I flew over here to this country. Least you can do is to, see me and my environment, not you and your helicopter, you know?" And he even complimented this reporter as I don't know, it might be just like a translational thing. She had fallen, he had caught her, and he was saying, "Oh, the reporters are just as beautiful as all the other women here," and she slapped him for it, saying that that was over the line. Are you serious? That was something that's normal. I mean, again, it's from a Western mindset. I don't know if it's considered good manners to compliment somebody that you're supposed to be that's supposed to be interviewing you or anything else like that. But it's not like he was being super rude or super crude about it, and yet she slapped him for it. It was sort of just like the work was trying to convince its audience by convincing itself that it had a proper representation of Tony when in fact it didn't. And even his whole reasons for going over there to Japan was was just dumb and infuriating, and I'm going to stop before I start to stand on a rant box.
All right, no, but I agree with everything you said. Again, like I think it's one if you understand who Tony Stark is as a character, and especially given how many movies we have experienced
Hmm.
now, given this Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this standing up next to after the release of Iron Man 2 is that this Tony Stark is such a poor depiction of what we're as a audience knows about Tony Stark, even if you're not
Hmm.
familiar with how he's supposed to be represented in the comic books. You get that if the movie Tony Stark, who is charismatic, not much of a playboy. I mean, it feels like in this that his playboy status is like toned up for some reason. I mean, even the female character that you mentioned earlier as a news reporter does do that slap, but it feels disingenuous,
Yeah.
because like she's a ditzy character, she's a tag along, she's somewhat of she plays into that Genki girl kind of stereotype of you know harem anime of like, oh yeah, she's ditzy but she's like good at her job. She's not the Lois Lane version of a reporter. She's the I don't even know what the opposite would be, but in that vein, she's being
Yeah.
useless essentially. Either she's being the damsel in distress, or she's getting into, oh no, I need Tony Stark to save me kind of situations. And again, it feels just forced, even though there's supposed to be a equal standing, or there is a foreseeable role she can play in the story, but they never
Yeah.
lean into that. So it's all very much a shadow characterization of all the characters across the board. Even the pairing to Tony Stark, who is the representative of the Japanese Special Defense Force,
Hmm.
and again, the commentary that can be made is that Japan is very much a demilitarized country. So him going to Japan to build an arc reactor does bring parallels to Japan's stance on like nuclear technology and clean energy. But again, the series is too busy with, oh, bad guys need to blow up something and giant robots need to fight.
Okay. So now I'm glad that you had explained that, because I can understand. There was that one scene where he was he being Tony was trying to help some first responders because there was an explosion in a city, in the city, and they were mad at him because of how he made his fortune. Because now I can understand that scene a little bit more, but still, even then, that scene felt so forced in him trying to get the Japanese person to like him. You know, like you said, it's a demilitarized zone, so like they don't want to use nuclear energy or use weapons of any sort, and just the main first responders reaction to Tony, and he doesn't care about what he did as Iron Man. He just cares of how he made his fortune. And now I can understand his stance a little bit if that was explained. But then again, I think this show was more or less made for Japanese people to sort of reinforce their quote unquote misled ideas about Iron Man.
Yeah, that's fair because I mean there is a strong leaning again, like what we talked about with High School of the Dead, is that how are foreigners viewed through the Japanese lens? And again, like there could have been some kind of depth to that, but what you're saying is that they're kind of confirming biases that they've already
Yeah,
had. They're
that's
not
it.
really challenging anything. They're not really adding anything to a conversation. And then even though it's shallow in that way, then also it's so boring because for one, the CGI is terrible. Madhouse
Is
is such a big studio. I mean, they're responsible for what we've talked about earlier, like Tatami Galaxy, High School of the Dead. They're kind of known for One Punch Man, and they most recently did like No Gun Life. So
hmm
it's not like they have a visual style that's like Ghibli or A1 Pictures, but they do have somewhat of a consistent
they have they're
animation
known for their
budget.
quality work.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But in here, it feels like their CGI is just like rushed. Again, talking about something like 10 years ago. I mean, there are examples of good CGI from 10 years ago, but like
hmm
for Madhouse to put that little care into Tony Stark's suit and the other suits in the show, when in the trailer, I don't know if you got a chance to watch the trailer, Sam, but in the trailer they do a hand drawn art style and don't even use the same design that they did in the show.
Are
So
you
it's like
serious?
visually, yeah,
Ah,
it's like visually distinct enough that you're like, this wasn't what I signed up for. So even with the like superficial notions that they're trying to capture, then the pacing of the three episodes. So like we go from Iron Man arrives in Japan for episode one, where the Dio suit malfunctions and Tony has to stop it, and the suit goes missing. In episode two, there's like a plutonium heist, and Tony's
yeah.
accused of it. Then episode three, there's killer tornadoes. And we haven't even talked about the antagonists of the series, the Zodiac organization, who are so bland and like so uninteresting as characters. So like all the villains that Tony goes up to on a
hmm
like again monster of the week basis are named after the Zodiac. So like episode one is Scorpio, episode two is Cancer,
hmm
episode three is Aries, and they're just so
I will say in the comics there was an organization known as the Zodiac. I mainly know this because there was a Spider-Man arc that happened maybe 2 or 3 years ago that dealt with I think it was Scorpio from the Zodiac. He was Spider-Man was dealing with him, and at that time Spider-Man was more of an international personality, so he had to deal with the different people in that organization, and with what was represented in that iteration of the Zodiac was there was magic stuff that was going on, and that's always been interesting when Tony. So I'm just assuming that if Spider-Man had a run-in with the Zodiac, then Tony must have had a run-in with them at some point or another. So that group is an established group, and I can see them using a lesser known villain or villainous group that have some sort of background to be put in a new work. Like for instance, with in the Spectacular Spider-Man how they use Tombstone, something like that. It was, a lesser known character and sort of reinvent them, so to speak, to bring new life into the work that they were being a part of. And I've always liked stories where they've pitted Tony against magic, because it's everything that Tony doesn't stand for, doesn't go against, and so it's always a good avenue to see him grow in that regard. And it's the members that were shown in this show, it's not even a ghost of a shell of the Zodiac that I've been exposed to. So, as you said, it's bland and very, very forgetful.
Okay. Yeah, and it's interesting enough that this did warrant a follow-up movie, so maybe the movie was already in the works at the time because the movie was released in 2013, so it was a good
Mhm.
period after this that the movie came out, and that was Rise of the Technovore.
Technovore. I did
Yeah.
watch that. Funny enough, I watched that without having to watch the anime. So, and I didn't even know that it was associated with the anime. I thought it was an independent thing, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Now my memory is sullied.
Yeah, so it's a direct-to-video sequel that came out 2 years after it, and it's very interesting. Like they did it again for um, Black Widow and the Avengers. I think I
Hmm.
forgot what that's called, but it's like Black Widow Declassified, I believe. That was
Yeah,
the other tie-in movie part of this Marvel anime. And
that
I think
wasn't
the
the Black Widow
overall.
and Punisher, right? When she was teamed
Oh
up with
yeah, the
Punisher.
Punisher. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. Because Norman Reedus from Walking Dead fame voiced Punisher in that.
Oh,
So
oh, he
yeah, you're right.
did. Okay,
Yeah,
that's why I liked it.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think we're both in the camp that. I mean, we're not talking about resurrect or rebury. We're talking more
Yeah,
sus. So
sus or
like,
expect.
this is definitely a sus from both of us. Would you agree, Sam?
Oh, most definitely. I would just go on to say with Marvel, their animated stuff, they've always been they've been more inconsistent than anything. They'll have some good stuff like Spider-Man or X-Men from the 90s, and then they'll get a flop, say something like Ultimate Spider-Man right after Spectacular Spider-Man, which was a good what's a good under the radar work, whereas Ultimate was more of a cash grab. I would say DC is more consistent in their animated works. It seems like no matter, it seems a lot of their animated stuff, whether it be the movies or the TV shows, they're consistently good. Whereas Marvel is more of a shot in the dark. So I, it's sad to say, but it's not unsurprising.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's more not surprising because of how diverse this could have been,
Yeah.
because they were kind of reaching out in a very unprecedented way to like, oh, Madhouse is such a big name in the anime industry, so let us like kind of do a collaborative work with them. But again, like not having Warren Ellis actually write the story and having someone else that is like Japanese entrenched into like the tropes and the archetypes, so it's more receptive to, I guess, a Japanese audience. But again, a
Hmm.
lot of that is lost because there's a clear understanding of what the character is and what the character isn't. And I think that that's where the show is just uninteresting, that they don't really have a good grasp of what makes Tony Stark relevant, especially if they were going
Hmm.
to. This did show on G4, if you remember
I
G4 back in
remember
the day.
G4. I remember
Yeah,
G4.
yeah. So it does have a dub. I actually listened to the dub. Did you listen to the sub, Sam?
Yeah, it was the sub, and it made everything worse. Seeing him in his 80s haircut in 2010. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, there are, I mean, we've just talked about the story beats, but also
Yeah.
like the music, the sound design is all lacking. The opening and the ending are kind of lackluster. There's nothing really standoutish about any of it. I mean, the supporting cast is very bland as well. There's really no interesting characters. There's like one, can I even say one? I can't even say one. I can't even name one. But yeah, just a below the bar average series and just completely sus of, I'm sure that every episode is going to have another member of the Zodiac. There's going to be a lot of sexual harassment, calls out on Tony for being a playboy, even though he's not really a
Not. Yeah.
playboy. Yeah, misunderstandings between Americans and Japanese people. Again, lackluster fight scenes. There's going to be big monsters smashing into each other without much animation or thought into how they're fighting. And that's all there is about this series, really.
Oh, I'm trying to think of something positive. The one thing that they did show that Tony was Tony when he said that he was going to retire. He had a ceremony that happened, and he was trying to show off his new Dio suit, and he told the people who were trained to pilot it that he wasn't going, he was going to let them do it because it was their time to shine. And lo and behold, during the Dio presentation, guess who was in the armor? It was Tony. That was like the one Tony thing that they got right.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, because again, like that's kind of goes into essentially his core character is that he's untrustworthy. I mean, he's not untrustworthy. He's untrusting. Very much in the same vein as like Iron Man is the Marvel Batman, same way as Bruce Wayne's untrusting of people. Like it's in the sense of, well, Gotham and things are better in my control. Again, talking about what would be Ultron coming up in the timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and why that was created. But the other thing, oh, to mention
Mhm.
lastly, before we wrap this up, is that you can't really find this series anywhere. It's streaming nowhere, and the only way you can really get your hands on it is through Amazon Prime Video, Google
Mhm.
Play, iTunes. But uh, I mean, if you want to ignore the first three episodes, it's episode four is free on IM Internet
IMDb.
Movie Database. Thank you. Yeah.
The
So
show
there's
is
that.
free on IMDb. I think that says enough for itself.
Well, just episode four.
Oh, just
But yeah,
episode 4.
just episode four. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't grab the price because there's no way I would buy this, no matter what price it would be at. But yeah, that says that the Iron Man by Studio Madhouse, or part of the Marvel anime series, is a sus from both of us. So Sam, let's wrap this up. Is there anything you want to say before we close out this episode?
I just have to say the way that you had down talked this anime and the Japanese people who made it, they're not gonna. How are we gonna have our fellow weewoos respect you, Jay, if you're just not humble?